guys know that.
Perfect. Well, Mekdes, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. I know it's been a while since you published this book. And so, and it, for those who don't know, it takes a couple of years once you
Hmm.
start proposing a book and writing it and getting it to market. So that means that this is a message that's been on your heart for probably close to 10 years or more. And so this is not a new conversation for you, but I'm so thankful that you spent some time bringing it back to the surface with our group, and it continues to be incredibly impactful. Why don't you introduce yourself to people so that they can know a little bit about your background as we step into this conversation?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be with you all. It's 8 p.m. where I am. So if I'm a little bit tired, it's because I just put my kids to bed. Yeah, so I'm Mekdes, originally from Ethiopia. I was born and raised in Ethiopia. Came to know the Lord when I was little, really, but gave my heart to the Lord and, committed to following Him and serving Him in high school. I was 16. And then there was just no turning back for me after that. I knew, I had something new has happened in my life, and I was just um, taken over by the Lord's love and wanted to follow him and serve him. So all of my dreams and hopes for my life shifted to, what do you have for me, Lord? And um, when I went to college back home, I went to college for about a year. God made it clear that it was not, that He had for me. There was something new, and if I was to trust Him and follow Him, that He would show me. So I said, yeah, send me, Lord. And that path is what brought me to the US. I went to college here. I ended up at a Christian school because I wanted to follow, the calling that the Lord had on my life. Went to school at Liberty University. And in my quest to pursue the Lord, to like do his mission in this world and connect with my fellow believers in my school and, leaders around me, I started kind of bumping against walls. Um, what was like cultural dynamic was happening, who are believers, that we have Jesus in common, so I should be able to connect with them. That question kind of really, is what for me to eventually write the book. I'm married to my husband, Ermi. He's also Ethiopian. We met in college the first year I went to college in Ethiopia, and then I moved here. So we've been long distance forever. I say that one year was just really so him and I could meet. I would not have met him if I had just came to the US. And then we have kids. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I can't believe it. I feel very old. And then, she was just like 3 yesterday. So I don't know how this happened. And I have a 6-year-old son, Noah, Netanya Noah. Yeah, and work for a nonprofit called the NA, National Association of Evangelicals. I am the project director for our Racial Justice and Reconciliation Collaborative. I work with denominational leaders and at times with, nonprofit leaders, talk about how to biblically reconcile with with racial injustice in the US and what the church's role is in that. And obviously, after writing the book, I've had opportunities to speak at conferences, right? And so I do like workshops, consulting with mission organizations, churches. I do one-on-one coaching. Yeah, that's where I am. I feel like though I really would say being a mom is probably my favorite job from all the jobs that I have. So that's me.
It's great. Thanks, Mekdes. And I am not sure if you feel good about your Wi-Fi on your side. I just wanted you to know that your video is kind of coming in and out. We were able to hear
Oh,
your sound. Oh, it's looking a lot better now. So, I
okay.
don't know if there's anything on your side that you want to adjust,
Hmm.
make sure that everyone can hear all of your wisdom tonight.
Could you hear me? It's just the audio, I mean the video that's in and out.
Yep, the audio went out for just a second, but it was back, and then you were frozen, but now you are all clear.
Interesting.
So,
Okay, I'll
yep.
try to
Mhm.
figure that out.
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Um, It's interesting how those of us who you're talking, I don't, I'm looking at participants, but I think we're all white women who are left on this call. Okay, so we can speak very directly to the role that we play internationally as white women, and how we oftentimes have great great intentions, but are can be blinded to our own skin and to our own privilege. Sometimes we can also take steps towards racial reconciliation and towards mutuality and hope that our intentions are enough to get us there. And I will say that as someone who cares deeply about peacemaking and deeply about breaking down barriers, I have just as much as anyone else fallen flat on my face and said the most embarrassing things, or seen myself through the lens that others see me in a way that's not as is not as pure and not as
Hmm.
reconciliative as I would like to be. And so I think it's powerful to be able to sit with you and really appreciate the directness in which you communicate, Mekdes, because we are hungry to have people to tell us what is what. But it takes a lot of trust and a lot
Hmm.
of relationships in the places where we work to find that, because our um, the girls are there. So thank you for your this direct.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
publishing this book, there were some white men who were missiologists who didn't know how to handle the
Yes.
truths here.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. It definitely, it's not easy, but you know, truth is truth. It has to be told.
right. And for the
Hmm.
church to be unified, we have to be honest with each other, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We've maybe tended to avoid certain conversations because we were afraid of disrupting peace, when
Hmm.
in order to really see each other through Imago Dei, through as image bearers of Christ and of God, then we have to be honest with each other. And that's how we get to the other side of this. So I'm
Absolutely.
really, really grateful for your work. Why
Thank
don't
you.
you share with us a little bit about the particular impetus for this book? I
Hmm.
got my screen blurred, but
There it is.
I I I keep this book really close and use it often. What
Hmm.
was the turning point for you where you realized, yeah, this needs to be out in the world, and it needs to be focused on reconciliation and mission
Hmm.
specifically?
Yeah, so I would say it was a journey. When I moved to the US, and I talk a bit about this in the book. I knew myself as Mekdes who loves Jesus, and if you were to ask me questions about who are you, I would say I'm a follower of Christ. I love Jesus. I'm gonna go to the ends of the earth and follow him. When I came to the US and I was in school, that was again what my pursuit was, but I kept getting interrupted by other things in my Christian community, my new, home church, that I did not recognize. So I just started asking questions like, what is this thing that's disconnecting me from this community? And I knew it wasn't for lack of a desire to learn a new culture or to connect. I already spoke the language really well. I came here to learn, so I was very open. I was making efforts to make friends. There was just something, and I finally identified that something was the questions that were being asked of me were not questions like, what's your favorite sport? Questions that connect you with people, but they were questions like, how come you speak English so well? How come you're not malnourished? They were questions framed from the biased perspective. And so I realized, oh, these people don't see me as someone to get to know with like a blank slate, right? When you meet someone, you're like, oh, tell me your favorite food, this and that. And your desire is to get closer to that person. But all their probably desires to get to know me, but they didn't know how to ask questions in a dignified manner that were inviting for me to get to know them as well. Their questions revealed their biases and kind of made me realize, oh, I can't be friends with you because you don't see me as somebody who is an equal. They probably don't realize that, right? It's a unconscious bias, you can call it that. But the all the questions that came at me felt like an attack, and I didn't get a blank slate. Therefore, I had to prove myself and say, no, 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 in my country, da 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 da, instead of me. So now I'm representing a whole nation, or if they're asking me about my skin, they would say, as a light-skinned Black woman, what are your thoughts about this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never like think of myself that way. Now I have to do this homework, right? And so that made me realize there is this thing that has prevented them from having a blank slate about me when they get want to get to know me. It's almost as if unless I'm willing to meet those bias standards, they don't know what to do with me. And so I started asking more questions and reading, and that eventually led me to really studying the history of race in America. And I found the answer there. It's because there is a different view of Black people and kind of this belief that either they're less than or they're just different human, as a human being, like a different species in a sense. And again, I was like, why? What? So this is going to be difficult in the church because if we're really like supposed to proclaim the gospel to all the nations from, every tribe and tongue and, nation, then we can't really believe that, oh, this one race is like the only one that's superior and is allowing like others to come to Jesus. Jesus is everywhere. I knew him before I came to the US, so they can't really claim him as there. So why is this interaction feeling like there's, we got him, you him before we got to you type of interrogation. So it's just bizarre and disorienting. And that really started, the questions. Again, it took several years. So once I had my daughter, I was making friends with people, who have um, kids, and then just learning, like, how do I raise a Black child in America? Because I did not grow up Black. I grew up Mekdes, I had the privilege of not seeing color when I was back home, but I had to figure that out. It was my duty as a mom to figure out how to raise Black children in America. And I actually met a friend of mine who had adopted from Ethiopia. She's white, has two Ethiopian daughters. And we were talking, and she introduced me to Be the Bridge, and said this space has helped me really well to figure out like how to understand, race, how to understand empathy, how to lament the injustice in the world. And so I joined that group, and they, as a requirement, like of their Facebook group, they'll tell you 3 months, don't say anything, just observe. And those 3 months, I just kept reading and like I was not allowed to comment, so I had to do a lot of reading and got to learn a lot and got to read people's interaction. And then when I was allowed to start asking questions, it just became a place of learning for me. And I think that's where I found language and I found my voice. Finally, it made sense. Like when you look at it from a racial lens, I realized that, oh, it's because I'm Black, I'm an immigrant, I come from a third world country. Um, and therefore, they don't have another framework to think about a person like me other than what was being sold to them, packaged and sold to them. And for the most part, that was short-term mission was the biggest vehicle that was telling my story for me, right? I couldn't tell mine. It was wiping away like the blank slate that I could have had with other humans, body of Christ. And so I was like, that's the problem. They take them into spaces that they've never been before, kind of give them this traumatic experience and then bring them back. People that have never seen poverty in that way, they are taken out of their very comfortable homes, put into just really extreme situations. And then the faces they see as they're experiencing this are people that look like me. And then they're supposed to go and stand in front of their church and say, those people, even though they don't have a penny to their name, they are joyous, they love Jesus, and we got to serve them, da da da. And that made them feel good and gave them the kind of fulfillment of, okay, I've served my community. or kind of engaged in civic duty, although it's like a controlled environment that was given to them. And so I was like, that's my my enemy is kind of how this machine and vehicle operates. And so I actually like while I was kind of getting at that, I read an article, I think it was in 2026, if I'm not mistaken, that was published by the Gospel Coalition. And it was an article by a missionary that was written. It was more supposed to be like a fundraising piece, and it says why the West needs, why Africa needs Western missionaries, and it's written for to appeal to the millennial audience. And he is just saying crazy things in that article, calling Africa the darkest place, spiritually dark, and just all the bad thing you can think of that you're not supposed to say. If you've read When Helping Hurts, that was the opposite of what he was describing. And I just was like, I can't believe the Gospel Coalition would do this. Like, I used their resources, to disciple others. I've served in church ministry for the past like 14 years or so before I transitioned into the nonprofit space. And so I've always discipled, believers in a cross-cultural context. And so I wrote to them expecting them to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We're going to take it down." So I had this like 12 lists of things that I wrote down and said, these are the reasons why this is wrong. Please take it down and please reach out to African leaders before you publish something like this. It's damaging to the work that our leaders are doing. And nothing. Nobody responded. It was crickets. Kept calling, emailing, nothing. I gave them about a month, got a hold of one of their editors, a black guy, and he was like, I'm sorry, Mekdes, I hear you. We'll do better next time, but I don't think we're gonna take it down. Because it was for a fundraising thing. It's been paid for, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna publish it. So I published that, and my website crashed that day. It was like a little blog that I had, and I had like 8,000 clicks, like when I woke up the next day, and it was going viral. And I was like, oh, something is here, you know? It's not just in my head. This resonates with a lot of people. And so they obviously saw it after it was published. They never took their thing down, unfortunately. But that got me, I guess, in front of publishers. And my blog was republished by Faithfully magazine. They reached out to me and were like, can we republish it? Da da da. I was like, sure. And then I realized, okay, Lord, if you have something you want to say to your people, let me, do this. And so the book was written, I guess, 4 years after that, 3 years after that, and came out, yeah, 2 years after it was written. So yeah, that's the journey that got me here. Yeah.
So it's incredible, so powerful. And I mean, gosh, you brought up an over 10 memories that
Mm,
just resurfaced as you were telling those stories. As my husband and I were preparing to move overseas, I remember someone handing us a book. The title of it was Out Where the Sinners Are. And it had like these tribal faces on it and white men and button up shirts. And I just thought that is really how people are still viewing missions.
mhm,
And honestly, when I think about the way that the church is still so segregated in the United States, then why would we think differently, right? When we enter into a
exactly.
culture that's not
Mhm,
prepared to push back on us.
mhm,
And I'd like to ask you some questions about that because I think my first experience overseas was in Haiti. Well, in college was in Haiti, and I was wearing scrubs as if I was a doctor on a medical trip. I was trying really hard to impress my husband, who was going to medical school. I got my first B in medical missions, and you should have seen the way that I sewed up this pig's foot. There is no path for me going into the medical field at all. And I proved that by trying to impress him. But I'm on this trip, and I really think that if someone had handed me a scalpel, I would have been allowed to do a surgery. And I, for a long time, thought that that was because maybe people just so desperate, you know?
mhm,
And I wonder now if it's because as Americans, we walk around so confidently barging into other people's spaces,
Hmm.
acting as if we are more qualified than we truly are
Hmm.
to do things, ever pausing to look around us for the skills that are actually higher than us in the cultures that we enter.
Hmm.
What do you think is sitting in the heart of our host country nationals, the nationals who are watching us walk into their communities without an invitation?
Hmm.
Um, and granted, people immigrate and people move and people enter into spaces all the time where there's not an open invitation. However, from the church's perspective specifically, what do you think is sitting in the hearts of the nationals there that
Yeah.
they are not invited to say? What would they say if it was safe and it was welcomed to
Yeah.
foreigners who have
Hmm.
come?
I think they would say, we really would love for you to give us the money that you're spending on this trip so we can actually use it and do so much good with it. For the most part, the money spent on taking, really people that have no business being there, they're there just because they can. Um, and when I say that, of course, you can travel wherever, you want to. You can do that, but do that for your own like learning, not to go and disrupt somebody else's flourishing, right? And so I think they would say, please give us the money. We definitely would love the money, but you can stay and we will do the work that needs to be done. At this stage in globalization, I would be very, I don't think it's possible to have an area where there isn't a hospital in at least 2 hours proximity, or, even if it's like a very remote area, that nothing really requires like someone traveling thousands and thousands of miles away to go and do that. So I think that happens because, there's just no accountability. People are allowed to do that. And then there is money that comes in. Let's say a team spends $50,000 on travel, all that stuff. But 10,000 might be given to the locals, to do mission work. And that 10,000 excuses the 50,000 that's been spent on to do all the damage basically by bringing, But if you were just even to send that, let alone the 60,000 that you could have given them, even the 10,000 without the people going would be it would be better than like damaging what's actually flourishing and then coming back and then throwing money at it. And so these are conversations that we have, I have with local leaders, but they would never dare say it. I've had conversations where they're like, Mekdes, be careful when you talk about this because we really don't want, we at least I need my 5,000 like every quarter or something to still come. So they're willing to continue opening up, their homes for whatever little access they'll have to resources. And I think the problem is that we don't know each other as brothers and sisters in Christ first. We don't have true partnerships or mutuality at the center of our relationship. Therefore, the goer doesn't say, "Hey, what do you need? Like, I trust you. Whatever you tell me, I will do whatever I can to provide." That's true partnership, right? To be able to say, "Hey, you're gifted at this. Speak the language. You already have trust built in the community. Whatever you say, I will do. Just tell me." And if they say what we need is money, this person should, like the Western partner should be able to say, here's the money that you need, and obviously put things in place for accountability. If they say we need leaders to come and, train our leadership, then be able to do that. But I feel like there is this, well, anywhere that I've worked at, they'll say, I don't know what they're going to do with the money. We got to be able to have somebody there to control it. I bet it typically comes at the cost of the actual gospel work that's being done. And so I think we have to find a good balance. Obviously, accountability is necessary. I'm not saying because they are on the other end of the world, they are saints, but I think there is excessive power, that's being used, and not enough question is asked, not enough relationship is built. So I would say that, and I talk about it in the book as like short-term missions being necessary evil. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't like me saying that, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, let's hang out there for a little while because, there will be some parts of the things that you write here that do cause people to pause and like, am I doing that? And I will say for the next generation, Gen Z, we're watching their interaction abroad just drop off completely. And so
Mm-hmm.
for Christian schools who have been able to have a vibrant missions department and now can't get their students to go on a trip, or for churches that have used this as a way of engaging people and can't find, the engagement after COVID. I mean, we've seen things
Yeah.
really, really fall. Um, what, how do we prevent this pendulum like swinging to where we don't, maybe we're so hesitant that we're going to be a part of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
we don't engage globally
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And I sure we can have a conversation about focusing domestically just as much as we're focusing internationally, but there a part of a global church that is useful when it engages? And what does mutuality look like? Can you give us
Mm-hmm.
an example of a mutual experience that has been beneficial for
Sure.
both the US church and the church abroad?
Yeah. Um, so I don't think I can answer the what does engaging globally look like without, because we're in America, without really addressing what's happening domestically. I think mutuality looks like receiving while you're also giving. Giving while you're receiving. And so if the West has typically said, let's go, let's go, let's go. But who is coming among the nations, from among the nations? And are we really receiving? When I talk about this, people ask, so are you for like open borders? That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But there is a large number of Christians who immigrate into the United States and are just suffering. And so, for the most part, we've politicized these types of conversations and we don't even have space to engage it with empathy as because it concerns the body of Christ. These are our brothers and sisters in Christ. It's easy for us to talk about the martyrs of the faith when it's on the other side, like when they go. But then when they come and they die on our borders, we don't want to talk about that. So that's one aspect of it that I would say I think we really have to engage that. The other part is, again, there are first gen churches here, like first generation, Spanish speaking churches, Amharic speaking churches, whatever, language it might be. They are, again, sent here. They have this thriving, faithful community that they are under-resourced. They don't have partnerships or collaboration. And so that's another way, I think, for us to really start establishing relationships because I think part of it is also just fear of like traveling internationally. If there is enough relationship locally, there will be invitations coming, from because the diaspora is really well connected. You can't, if I go to Ethiopia, and talk to a certain like mission organization leader, they'll be able to tell me who exactly is connected with them. We're all just very interconnected. And so trust can be built, in that way. But then again, when you go globally, I don't necessarily believe that God calls people to like institutionalized mission journeys. I believe that it's an individual call that God puts on our hearts. Could be 2 to 3 people going together, whatever, but this kind of mass sending, I'm very glad it's not working, honestly. I'll be honest with you, because it challenges us to, question, what's going on, but also I mean, um, churches in the global south have been asking, leaders have been asking for a moratorium. Can you guys stop, please, so we can like get it together? You guys have done a lot of damage, and that has not come from their request. And I'm glad God has given them a COVID moratorium in a sense, that they can breathe and they can contextualize their own theology. So I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Obviously, from this side, I understand that, this type of exposure, cultural exposure is advantageous for students, and it's a great like cultural intelligence training, whatever, or cross-cultural ministry training. But I think it's for the benefit of those who are going. I doubt it's for the benefit of those who are, receiving them. So if you need to do that, I think there's a healthy way to do that. Just go on as a tourist, go and explore history. And I mean, when we do fancy trips, we think of Paris or like, Rome or whatever. But there are beautiful places to visit in Africa and in Asia. And we don't think about the tourism industry from that perspective. There's always like a Western lens, a superior like vacation only is in the West. So I think there are other ways to satisfy the cultural curiosity if really that's what is needed. This desire to only infringe on like people of color eh, based on their poverty, I think it's sick. I'm sorry. It just bothers me so much. Like, why are you only interested in in the just there are different names people call it. I don't necessarily like to use, some of the terms, but it does feel like there's an appetite to observe like oppression. And I don't think that's healthy, unless there's an invitation from the local body to come and be with them, to pray with them, to plant churches with them, to help them get to know them. This idea of just putting your finger on a map and saying, we're going to go there because they got nothing and impose your money or your access on them when they haven't asked for it. I'm glad that's not happening. Really, that's kind of, and I hope it continues. And I'll also say, local leaders, now people like me, most of them with, I mean, my age or people that have come up with me that are leading in their own context would say that's amazing. And they would say, oh, it's not something that we need. Yeah, so I think it's a good thing. I don't know if I'm answering it, in
Yeah.
the way that addresses what you're asking. So you might, I don't know if you need to ask a clarifying question, but that's what I got for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question, but if anybody else wants to have a question for Mekdes, go ahead and either, use your hand raise feature, or you can put a question in the chat, and I'd love for you to, engage with Mekdes directly. But as you guys are thinking through what you'd like to hear from her, I want to pull a quote. I knew I was going to love your book when I just got to the introduction and I paused, because one of my favorite quotes was what you started with. And it says, until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. And I think about that a lot. I have a daughter who was a native Ugandan. She's a Ugandan American now. And I was consulting with a nonprofit organization last year who had come to her school and given a presentation trying to raise money
Mm,
to dig water wells in different parts of the African continent. And she said, Mom, why does everyone act like Africans can't do anything for themselves? She's like, that whole video was just full of people that looked like me, crying and looking like they were so pitiful. And I took that back to the organization and shared that with
mm,
them. They received it. They received it well, but it just speaks to the point of asking why do we dehumanize? Is it
mhm,
easy to dehumanize someone in another part of the world when we haven't
mhm,
engaged someone from their diaspora in our own backyard?
mhm,
So
mhm,
last thing I'll say to that is that I don't have a current statistic, but as you speak to the native or to the diaspora that's in the United States, it traditionally was about 7 years before an immigrant would be engaged by a natural born American
Mm-hmm.
as they were finding their way on US soil.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I don't think that when we're celebrating the 4th of July or a US holiday of any kind, we're looking around and saying, where are our new neighbors that have come
Mm-hmm.
to fly our flag? Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
those are natural connections to the entire globe
Mm-hmm.
that do make a lot of meaning. You say at the end of this chapter, or at the end of the introduction, leading back to that quote, you say, it will never be fixed until the global South starts telling its own story. It's time for
Mm-hmm.
them to write, for us to tell our stories as they are, and to find a path to truly heal and to unify. And so, as others on the call are kind of thinking through their questions, I want to pause there because here you are telling your story. You've taken up the pen or the type. We don't use typewriters, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
keyboard keyboard. You're
Mm-hmm.
telling your story, and you've gotten a lot of pushback for it, and so how do you suggest that we posture our hearts as we prepare to receive the things that you have to say? How do you tell people who look like us
Yeah.
how to prepare our hearts for what you're going to share with us?
Yeah, I would say pray, honestly, because it is a hard truth to hear. Um, Also, it's my story, and I'm taking you basically being vulnerable and allowing you to really see from my side how it is and what it looks like and how the dots connect because I'm wearing this skin and I've lived in a different country. If I didn't have those two factors, I would have probably had the same experience as a little bit of sheltering and this idea. But I relate to that because that's how I lived back home. Everybody looked like me. And I knew my social circles really well. I knew if I needed, something who to be close to or not. When you go into a different world and you have to learn how to operate, it's almost like you're a fly on the wall because nobody really knows who you are and they don't care. And so true colors truly come out and you get to experience things in a unique way. And so I think I'm just sharing what my experience was like. This is my story. There's a reason that I am telling stories throughout chapters. It's a missiology is very academic, and that's the part that I just never really liked about it. We don't talk about missions enough theologically because it just gets very academic and heady. And so, if I was to write it from an academic lens, I knew it wouldn't get in the hands of the typical goer. And I'm trying to the person who's been recruited by those videos to go, who's feeling like, oh my gosh, I've seen this. I feel guilty. I better give my money. I better go and, commit to this. I wanted that person. I actually had an image of one of my good friends in my head as I was writing this book. Her name is Julie, and I keep thinking, would Julie understand what I'm saying? Because she's like very like she likes things simple, very like watered down. She's like, give me the basics. So I tried to tell it through, so even though it's complex ideas, but when you're telling a story, people are able to connect to it and at least try to put themselves in your shoes. And so there was a reason for it not to be this heady academic book that I tell lots of stories because of that. So I hope that you're open to step into somebody else's shoes. I also want to say again, I was very vulnerable, and because of that, you might think I'm angry in some of the things that I say. But I would say that's righteous anger. And I've been asked if you were to like if when we, reprint second, third edition, is there anything that you want to edit, since you've gotten pushback on your tone? Would you want to kind of tone it back? And I said, no, that's how I felt when I wrote the book. the sense of like the injustice that was burning in my heart is poured out in the book. And it is what it is for that season. I may not be in that place today, but I'm not in that place because I've been able to write the book and I've been able to process and cry out to the Lord and, voice my concerns to the church. Now it's not like here, I don't have to hold it in anymore. I've given it to the church. What you do with it is your responsibility. I get to live my life and kind of, do the work that God is calling me to do. So it is I did it out of obedience to the Lord and, having a prophetic voice. I know it's not the most comfortable and cute thing to do. It might rub you it might rub you a little hard, but I just ask you to pray. I am your sister in Christ. I'm not an enemy. I'm just telling you something that might actually move you closer to experience the beauty of who God is through other cultures. Really, that's why I love cross-cultural ministry because I'm like, God was so small when I was just in my Ethiopian box. And then he just became huge, once I left home and I started interacting with other cultures. And I'm like, I'm going to keep finding him through other cultures because this is like the closest thing to heaven to keep experiencing God in newer and beautiful ways. And if it has to get uncomfortable for you to get there, I think it's okay. Yeah.
It's great. It's so good. And a true friend tells you the truth, right? A real friend
Yes.
tells you the truth.
Hmm.
That's the only way, as we started this conversation, that the church really can move forward and can allow us to heal. And so, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Who else? Who has a question, or does anybody have something that you'd like to pose to Mekdes before we let her go? You're welcome to unmute and just ask it directly, and I'd love to have you engage.
I can start us out. I do think it's special and unique that it's all women on this call, or not unique. It's special that it's all women on this call, and it doesn't surprise me. Also, I think I think when it comes to challenging the way things have always been, I think naturally maybe we as women tend to kind of be open to that a little bit quicker.
Hmm.
I'm very much stereotyping here, but like I don't think it's a coincidence that it's all women on this call. Um, and I'm curious in the context of like through the missions through the lens of the church, especially in places. I'm trying to find the best way to ask this because there's amazing men in this world, and hopefully we all have amazing men
Of
in
course.
our life. But there's especially in churches, it's still very male dominated in the missions
Hmm.
space and in the programming space for churches. And I'm curious what you would encourage us or equip us as women how to have a voice when we're not always the ones that are sitting in
Hmm.
the big seats in those
Yeah.
spaces. Is that an okay way to ask that? I'm not trying to like, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I totally get it. And I think I was just talking about this with someone, but although mission spaces are led by men, about 70 something percent of missionaries are actually women. So it really is just a misrepresentation of power. It's a power dynamic again. The power, those who are holding power don't represent the people on the ground. So I think that's something that needs work, right? The actual women who are on the field should be the one that are represented in leadership as well. So I think that's one factor. But then also I think Lauren actually introduced me to Red Velvet. I always say red velvet.
Velvet ashes.
Velvet ashes. I don't know
Red
why
velvet.
my brain, this is my
Because that's the best
bilingual
pink.
brain goes to red velvet because it means nothing to me just as a name, the velvet ashes. I love their ministry because it's focused on women and equipping women and, creating spaces for women. And so if really about 70% of the mission, field is occupied by women, then why our focus is not on women? I also think kind of second gen focused, opportunities to equipping the church will automatically involve women, and those two are like women are more open, and then children are, you can shape and mold them. So I think our efforts need to reflect that rather than kind of this fundraising focused, you take a lot of men because they have money and da da da. It's just a lot of the things we do is wrapped around how much money can we spend. I mean, can we raise in order to raise the money? I got to take them in, I got to convince them. So I think our priority is in the wrong box, basically. So yeah, I think we got to shift some of our strategies to equip and empower women and then to let them involve their children. I think more mission opportunities for moms to take their kids and, all of that would be such a beautiful way to, create something more sustainable.
Totally. Missions as a lifestyle rather than a program, an
Exactly.
institutionalized program. I will give a shout out. I know there's several Knoxville people on here, but Ken, Knoxville International Network, does a really good job of this. We,
Hmm.
Morgan had told me a little bit about Ken before I moved here, but we recently joined a life group through our church, and our life group is connected to a family through Ken. So Ken kind of like pairs refugee families in the Knoxville area up with life groups or families that are basically that bridge person. I know you shared the stat about how many refugees don't meet Americans, even though they're living in America. In America,
Hmm.
they don't meet them until several years into being here. It's not their communities. They don't. It's like hard to like know how to tap into that.
I
But
should clarify, they're not invited into the homes of
Into the
oh
homes,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But Ken has done a really good job of creating a system, because sometimes it does take systems to get people rolling with things. But they've done a really good job of connecting people in Knoxville and making it to where hopefully a lot of these refugee families
Hmm.
feel welcomed into homes, welcomed into life groups, even if they don't speak the language. We're eating meals together, we're learning English
Hmm.
together just by chatting, and so that's been a really cool way I've seen that practiced in Knoxville.
Yeah, that's great. And Morgan asked, how would you suggest we invite people into a more mutual approach because their approach typically is what they've seen before? And I'm working with a church right now that, has a ministry in Ethiopia and they go and, they do all kinds of things. And they reached out and said, hey, like, we really would love to hear from your perspective if what we're doing is okay. And if not, like, can you help us? And my first question was, is there an Ethiopian church where you are? And do you know the pastors and priests if there's like an Orthodox church? And they were like, I never thought about reaching out to them, And so I that's right now they're putting together an event, like a community-based event. They'll do, food tasting and going together to serve another community. Like the Americans are not coming to serve the Ethiopians. They're doing lunch together, a cultural exchange experience, and then they're together going to go and serve another community through a nonprofit that kind of assigned them, project to do. So I think experiential learning is what I would say. Typically, mission trip is an experiential, it's supposed to be an experiential learning, but a more productive experiential learning that starts from home, that starts to challenge both the kind of the racial division there is, the cultural fear that there is, and facilitate experiences like that that are easy. I feel like that's like a low-hanging fruit for you to do. And then you can move into what does that church need? One of the needs that we have in a community of immigrants is discipling our next generation. And a lot of churches have tons of resources for that. So I've been encouraging them, invite their, young leaders to your like residency programs if they want to plant churches. You can raise up pastors together. And then do they have a kids ministry curriculum? You might share that with them. Can you train their kids ministry if they don't have space? Maybe you can share space with them. There's just so much that could be done if we're just willing to be open to what the Lord wants to do and how He wants to change us. I think we're so focused on changing others that we don't allow the Lord to transform our lives through this process. And a lot of it has to do with that, like giving up control. So we are changed while we're also, trying to change others.
So good. So good. Abby's sharing a couple of links in the chat. You also have a link to the book if anybody needs that. We can plug that in for you. I'm gonna
Thank you.
let you guys. Well, for sure, Mekdes, it's 9 o'clock, and so you strike me as a early to bed, early to rise kind of person.
I am. My eyes are getting
No, it's
tinier and
you're.
tinier.
I'm just getting started, but don't try to talk to me. If we were doing this at even 8 a.m., that would not work for me either.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
we'll meet together on October 20th, and I'm excited to be with you guys as we kind of break down the first 5 chapters of this book and get back together in a few weeks. So, Mac, does anything else you want to share before we break up tonight?
No, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you. I'm really excited you picked my book. I always just feel so blessed when people, tell me we're going to read your book. I'm like, yeah, it's still getting out there. So I really appreciate it. And I hope the Lord blesses you as you're reading it.
Thank you for your courage. Thank you for
Thank you.
paving the way for others to speak and giving, I think your words give other people courage and give us the courage to engage, right, into some hard conversations that we've wanted to have for time and just didn't know how. And so we really appreciate you being a guide, and we know that's come with some risks, but so
Yeah.
appreciate your work and your obedience to the Lord. Guys, let us know if
Thank you.
anything. We'll see you in October.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all for being here.